Hi, how are you today? Alright, so today we are basically going to be going over more of the search monopoly lawsuits from the Google case filed in Judge Mehta's court, MEHTA. Um, and that is originally filed in 2020, or the initial complaint was made in 2020. The trial happened in 2023, and the exhibits that we're going to be reviewing happened in 2023. And then decisions from that case have been coming out over the last couple of years based on, like, how long this shit takes, appeals, blah, 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 things like that, I think. If I understood correctly. Also, I'm not a lawyer. So yeah, what basically we have looked over 66 trial exhibits so far, and then the last live stream we did 12 of those. So what I'm about to do is roll my intro, then we'll do a little review of what we talked about in our last live stream, and then we are just going to keep going with this thing. So yeah. Hi, my name is Alexis, also known as Lexi or Deaf Child. I was born deaf, hard of hearing. I began doing business as Deaf Child 2013, marketing 2011, sales 2009. I've earned 50 plus certifications in marketing and sales. My Bachelor of Science from Loyola University, New Orleans, with a music industry studies major and a business administration minor. Deafness runs in my family genetically. Speech is not fully accessible to me. Anyway, I'm here to bitch about whatever the fuck is on my mind. So here we go. Visit my site at noladeafchild.com. So, in the last live stream, we did a lot. We did 12. I don't think I said that word right. We did 12 live streams. Wait, but what the fuck is wrong with me? 12 exhibits in the last live stream. And so in that process, whenever I do that many in one live stream, it can be kind of difficult for me to summarize that number of trial exhibits, So, but yeah, I'm gonna give that a whirl. Let's see how that goes. The captioner did not put that right. The caption, okay, well, it adjusted. It's right now. I apologize. It put rural instead of rural. WHIRL. And so, yeah, I was like, okay. Anyway, okay, moving on. So, in the last live stream, we went over an email that was kind of a follow up to the email in the live stream before that, where Eddy had disagreed with some wording about that How had said that was published in a magazine, in Time magazine. And so and so another email we reviewed in the last live stream began kind of with that concept. Well, not kind of, with. And so Hal Varian had been basically quoted as saying that scale wasn't really important because it wasn't about the quantity of data, it was about the quality of data or something like that, in regards to how they were not worried about Bing at the time. And then and before that, though, we had seen where Eddy had gotten Hal to admit in writing that scale was actually crucial. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I apologize. I just got a text message. I apologize. There have been a few different things happening in my life recently, from family members getting surgery to my own legal stuff happening to I had a car wreck earlier in the year to like all of these things. I don't know why I'm telling you all my business, but whatever. But I'm just saying, like, that's kind of like why I'm distracted and why I am responding to things and checking my phone and stuff while I'm streaming, because fuck it. Like, if I just wait, I'm never going to get to live stream. But anyway, so in the last situation, we had this email from between Hal and Eddy, and now we read in the last live stream another email regarding that same magazine article, where everybody was kind of congratulating Hal for being published, and we saw the entire context of the article where he said they were talking about not being worried about being, and all of this is relevant, I swear. And then after that, we read a presentation about unified click prediction. And this goes into how Google utilizes clicks and engagement to predict future behavior. And it kind of goes into some of that details. It's all connected. Keep staying with me. And then they go into a Google document that had bullet points for the CEO about the machine learning based algorithm updates at the time named BERT that had to do with how search results got ranked. And this was, and so then after that, they went into another email between Google employees where they were worried about Google's market share and about Microsoft's market share, and they were talking about how to stay on top of competition and outperforming their competition and writing. So yeah. And then we get into the Google presentations, right? And so in one of the presentations, it's called Q4 Search All Hands. And this presentation not only went into a lot of the details as to how the search algorithm worked, but also was stressing the importance of keeping the details of this data with only the search team, because they didn't want this information leaked to others because it's how they made their living. It was 90% of their monetization is what was coming out in all of these presentations. At this point, I think I'm getting it jumbled together. But anyway, they also did another presentation on ranking for research, and that also went into more details about how they specifically ranked in the algorithm as well as the ad auction system, and it kind of explained, in my opinion, that and the research and machine intelligence all hands. That explains specifically how the machine intelligence feedback loop worked in order to scale based on past data, right? And then they also did a presentation on logging and ranking this data and how they scaled and logged, information and ranked it based on the scalability of the past logs. And then they went into a presentation on comparing Google to Bing. So why was Google comparing themselves to Bing if they weren't worried about it, as stated previously, right? And then they went into another presentation again about the magic of Google, and that kind of reiterated the same information given to us previously with the machine intelligence feedback loop, as well as went into further details about going more into deep machine learning and some of those technological information. And then it kind of explained how this is the way in which Google was able to continue growing as a business as well. Okay, all right. Now, then we have two more emails. So we got an email from John Giannandrea of Google to Daniel Allegre of Google. So these are Google employees. And they were talking about Apple requesting more information about all of that proprietary data we just discussed in these previous trial exhibits, right? There was specific click engagement and feedback behavior, all of that information Apple wanted access to. And John Giannandrea, when he was working for Google, was like, why the fuck would we give them that information, basically, And then, next email, and so this was in 2016, and then somewhere between 2016 and 2018, John Giannandrea went from working from Google to working for Apple. And so in the next email series we see, it's John Giannandrea, but when he's working for Apple. And he's talking to another Apple employee about Bing versus Google versus Siri. And he literally said the only way that we would be able to compete with Google effectively is if we had access to or the ability to scale, or access to their scaling, their data in which they scaled. So yeah, that's where we left off. And all of that is relevant, in my opinion, into proving the monopoly, because all of the other trial exhibits we had looked at previously really explained, I mean, a lot of it explained the way that search worked, but it also explained the revenue share agreements and how the agreements lock them into exclusivity, and that how all of these companies' main source of revenue right now is through these Google agreements, right? A lot of I mean, not main source, but a big source, right? Or some of it may, depending on the company. I'm heavily generalizing. But anyway, so that was what we had previously been looking at in a lot of the trial exhibits. And now in these recent trial exhibits, we're seeing even more about not only did the agreements itself lock them into this, but also we look into the scalability of the data. And because of those agreements haven't been in place when they were in place, particularly with the exclusivity clauses, now we're at this place with the scalability of data keeps people from effectively competing, even if they wanted to today, without having access to that data. You know what I'm saying? So I think that speaks to what is going to be occurring in the remedies, in my opinion, potentially. But anyway, all right. We're just going to see how many I can get through. We'll just see whatever feels right. But next up, we are basically going to start the going through the trial exhibits next, and just seeing however many I can do now, because we've done 66 so far. I would like to at least do 4 today and get to 70. If the first 2 I look at happen to be way longer, we might just do 2, but we'll see, because I never know how long this shit is until I get there, you know? Okay, so first up, we're going to look at exhibit number UPX0241. And this is an email, this is a different email from John Giannandrea of Apple to Adrian Perica, I don't think I'm saying that right, of Apple, regarding some thoughts. And this was uploaded August 20, or not uploaded, email was from August 29, 2018. And it was filed November 8th, 2023 with this court case. So, a good bit of it is redacted, but let's see what's not. It says, Adrian, that was a super useful meeting to understand what they have and don't have, and where they are investing. Some high-level observations. 1. Their traffic is small. Redacted month versus us at redacted week, and G at redacted day. This is presumably because they are nowhere on mobile. We have redacted weekly actives. 2. They are investing a lot more in search than we are. They implied greater than 1,000 people. 3. They are not launched in most of the countries I think we care about. 4. If they need to give away the product at redacted percent, TAC to get close to the current economics, we would need to be really sure that it's strategic for both of us. It's a sure sign that their ad tech plus marketplace is way worse, more than twice as bad in fact. By the way, it's not so much about the scale of the advertiser network, they said, redacted versus AdSense redacted. Most of these advertisers churn out quickly. All of the money is in the top, and then a lot of this here is redacted, and that seems to be it. Okie dokie. So, I'm not entirely sure which company they're speaking about. So they obviously work for Apple, so they're talking about another company investing more than they are. So I'm assuming they mean Google, but then when they were talking about nowhere on mobile, that makes no sense because Google was everywhere on mobile. So now I'm wondering if they mean Yahoo or some Microsoft or some shit. I don't know. Am I wrong for thinking that? Like, what is it? I don't know for sure what the fuck they're talking about, to be honest, in here. We'll see if the rest of the evidence helps me have more opinions on what these thoughts could be relevant to. But I mean, what we can tell is that they, in the meetings, that they were discussing where they were investing their marketing spend and their overall business spend, potentially, you know. But you know what? Speaking of scalability, because we have been on scale recently, let's look at this scale line again because it could have to do with this. It says, by the way, it is not so much about the scale of the advertiser network. They said, redacted versus AdSense redacted. Most of these advertisers churn out quickly. So, they're saying that their scale isn't even about the ads ran on there, in my opinion, because the advertisers churn out quickly, which would mean many advertisers don't last there. And I would say that's because a lot more people run ads on Google than understand how it works. So, and just in general on any platform, a lot more people start running ads and they understand how running ads works. So they will run ads, waste money, and then not keep running the ads because they felt like it was a waste of money because they didn't know how to utilize the platform. But right here, they are talking about AdSense, which would, again, make me feel like they're talking about Google. So, maybe at this time, Apple was doing a lot more on mobile than Google, or they're not necessarily talking about search, but they're talking about overall mobile, like, because at that time, Google wasn't really producing mobile devices. So if you're talking about, like, devices only, you know, that would, yeah, for sure, Apple did more mobile devices. I don't know. Who knows what they were talking about, but that scale comment. I don't know. Alright, anyway, so let's keep going. Actually, I'm going to keep that link so I can add it to the thing later. Okay, so next up we got UPX0242. And this is another email from John Giannandrea of Apple to Adrian Perica of Apple regarding Microsoft. Oh, maybe it's related to Microsoft, who knows. And this is from November 5th, 2018. And this was filed November 8th, 2023 with this court documentation. And let's see. So the subject is related to Microsoft and whatever. A lot of this is redacted. But what's not redacted says, I appreciate their radical transparency. And then a bunch of this is redacted except for two words that say not yet. I don't know why they didn't redact those two words, because they might as well have redacted it if you don't know what the fuck it's in relation to. But whatever. And then it says, I have been living on Bing for the last few days. Mostly it works fine. Then in the odd long tail query, it just doesn't. A recent example is Annie Lennox's first band. Google gets the tourist as a web answer. Bing highlights the same answer, but shows a box highlighting the Eurythmics. This worries me a lot. JG. And Adrian before that had written, John, after Thursday's session, what's your gut on this situation? Could Microsoft and us catch up, or is the gap much larger in the user space than appears on paper? Thanks, Adrian. Okay, so let's look at the timing. Well, no, these are completely different, because this is in August and this was months later in November. So at first I was like, what if they're related? Now I don't think they're probably related, but they could have been. But basically they're talking about whether or not Microsoft and Apple could catch up with Google search. And John Giannandrea was saying that there were still issues, you know, that a lot of the Bing worked just as well, but some of the results were not necessarily the answer he was looking for, I believe, is what I'm getting from this. And then next up here, we've got UPX0243. And this is an email from Varian of Google to Daniel Russell of Google related to read me first. And it says reply to read me first. And this was sent May 29th, 2020. Oh, that is interesting because the monopoly case filing occurred 2020. I don't know the exact month though, but yeah. And it was filed November 8th, 2023. So, from How to Varian, and to reply to reading first, it says, I think that everyone would have to agree that both data and analysis are important. Is there a way to quantify that? None of the startups I talked to said their problem was lack of data. All of the startups I talked to have said that their problem was lack of data and analysts. But that's an anecdote, not data. Which I guess would be interesting because some of the editorial evidence that we had looked at in the last live stream, Apple was asking Google for data, in my opinion. So before that, Daniel had said, hi Hal, I'll take a look at your slides tomorrow. Quick scan, very interesting. The data quality effect is real. Peter Norvig has his own version of this story that's fairly interesting. But the algorithmic tweaks and data tweaks, as you point out, are also a big part of the story. I admit that I'm not too keen on talking to regulators, but will do it if you think it's useful for the greater good, and if you think I can do it effectively. We'll get back to you tomorrow. Dan. And then before that, Hal had written, sent you some follow-ups which you can peruse at your leisure. I don't think I said that right. Meanwhile, I'm very interested in the stats you shared about URL typos, etc. I attached the article version of the slides I sent you earlier. Could you take a look at the Brittany part and see if you agree with what I said? One of the topics that comes up constantly is the data network effect, which argues that high quality leads to more users, which leads to more data, which leads to more analysis, which means high quality. Though this is more or less right, 1, it applies to every business. 2, the more analysis should really be more and better analysis. Much of Google's improvement over the years has been due to thousands of people, such as yourself, identifying tweaks that have added up to Google as it is today. This is a little too sophisticated for journalists and regulators to recognize. They believe that if we just handed Bing a billion long-tail queries, they would magically become a lot better. We've been doing a number of presentations to regulators on this topic. See my presentation here. I wonder if you would be willing to do a meeting with them on how improving quality depends more on the algorithmic improvements, tweaks, than on the big data per se. In my opinion, or am I wrong, are they just trying to gaslight everybody like, no, you don't need access to our years and years of scalable data. You just need to do better and work harder and be smarter. Sorry. Anyway, and then it says, if you are willing to do this, let me know and we can set something up. And that would be stories like the URL typos, and this would be highly secure, so you can speak freely on these matters. Happy to work with you on this. Daniel Russell, and the Google search quality and user happiness. Is that a real job title? Users are unhappy, Google. Fuck you. Anyway, and then it says, check out my new book, The Joy of Search. So yeah, I guess I already kind of summed up what the fuck I think about that. It looks like they're trying to put in writing as of 2020, which I think is kind of entertaining when you think of the timing of the monopoly lawsuit filing that we're looking at here, right? Where they're like, yeah, nobody's ever asked us for any type of information. The previous evidence shows that's not consistent, right? And then they're like, yeah, nobody needs data. Previous evidence shows that's not consistent. So I'm very entertained by this. Like, what the fuck is that? Anyway, let's move on. So now we've got exhibit UPX0260. And this is an Apple presentation. I do not know how the fuck to say this. Aethon, Aethon, AETHON. Status update, May 2021. And this was filed November 8th, 2023. I accidentally took that away. Sorry. Okay, hold on. Baby, come back. You can blame it all on me. I was wrong, and I just can't live without you. Okay, are they even pronouncing the T8? Is it Ion or Aethon? I don't know. I don't know how to say this shit. Status update. It is privileged and confidential. And then it has this word I can't fucking say again and the definition. And I think this is supposed to be how to pronounce it, but I'm even more confused. But it says Aethon, I don't know. Aethon is one of the 4 flying horses belong to Helios in Greek mythology. It is red-brownish. The ancient Greek word Aethon means blazing, and that's from May 2021 here. Wait a minute, that's confusing. How is this labeled May 2021? Oh, this is from May 2021. I'm getting the last one confused. Okay, alright. The last trial exhibit we looked at was from 2020, so for a second I was like, how does this say 2021 when it should be from 2020? But I had gotten that confused. We're in 2021 now. Ooh, so this was made after the monopoly lawsuit case had been filed. So they were fully aware that they were being charged as a monopoly at this point. Fully aware. Okay. And then the slide is redacted, but it was labeled task design. And what's not redacted is a note at the bottom that says, for most head queries, like Amazon, graders do not have a strong preference one way or the other. And I don't know what they mean by like preference of what, but whatever. And then it's redacted, but it says for result relevance, Google wins Bing in almost everywhere, except for English United States desktop with Safari queries, which is a tie. And then it's redacted, and it says Google has much larger lead on mobile than desktop. Is this a Google presentation? No, this is an Apple presentation, mind you. So, yeah. So, anyway, and then it says, for overall preference, Bing outperforms Google on desktop user interface and diversity in English in the United States. That lead is weaker in French in France. I can't speak. You know what the fuck I mean. And Japanese in Japan, whatever, yeah. And the notes here, which are also partly redacted, it says, this results match our intuitions. First, Google has a strong lead in relevance, in particular for long-tail queries and in international locales. On the other hand, we heard that Bing has invested heavily in desktop features, in particular in English United States. It's good to confirm in the eval that Bing in English United States desktop is actually preferred. And there's something else in here that's redacted as well. And then it says presentation sways the overall preferer. And then a bunch of this is redacted. And it says strong preference to Bing desktop presentation or diversity. I don't see any notes here on that. So yeah, I don't really have full context on these slides, and with a lot of it being redacted, it's even harder. But it looks like this is an internal Apple presentation comparing themselves to Google and Bing, or like, you know, just kind of like seeing how everybody's kind of performing against each other at this point. And so yeah, and in here they put from their perception that Google is basically dominating almost everything. You know what I mean? So yeah, and I do think that is going to be able to be argued in terms of like, look, even your competitors think that you're dominating this industry. And even your competitors have it, and that lines up with all this other evidence where they can show like Apple had asked for this data so they could effectively compete and was denied and things like that. So yeah, let's see. Let's try and do a couple more, or like I'll try to do one more right now, and then we'll try to do like 5 more and see if we'll just like I'm thinking we'll end today at 10. What do y'all think? We'll see. We'll fill it out. All right. So next up, we've got exhibit UPX 0266, and this is an email from John Giannandrea of Apple to Adrian Perica of Apple regarding search lingo. And this is from November 8th, 2018. And it was filed November 8th, 2023. So, and it had said, and it's from an Apple, it's internal on Apple, and it says it's privileged and confidential. And it says, Adrian, since Kevin and I were talking in code, at least at last week's meeting, here's a primer on the key parts or a modern search product. You may help explain why there are so few serious contenders in this space because of the depth of research and development needed. And it's from John Giannandrea. It says crawl or index. A search index is essentially a copy of the web, but the web is really big and it's impossible to make a copy of all of it. The issues are size and freshness. It's a trade-off. Also, many docs are duplicates, so you need some way to deduplicate content at scale, which is hard. If you have IT documents, then probably some are only updated order months. I feel like, I don't know, that line didn't make sense to me, but whatever. It updated order months, what does that mean? But okay, so then it says there is a shortage of bandwidth to be able to copy the web and keep it all fresh at scale. Right, so that's why they only like copy right now, you know what I mean? But if you index Twitter or New York Times, you want order seconds. Oh, now I see. Oh, when it's updated, like order, like the order month, the order it's updated in, I'm assuming. I don't know, because I'm not used to seeing that worded in that way when thinking of SEO. But anyway, it then says the tech to make the trade-off is called crawl scheduling, and it's super hard because the web doesn't tell you what is important. Once you have your copy of the web, you need to turn it into a searchable database, the index. You can index documents by query term, or term indexed, or by document, doc indexed. Once one gets you recall, the other gets you precision. Again, a trade-off. Given that you are crawling and refreshing millions of docs per minute, you need a super fancy database to be the index. Query reformulation or search ranking. Given a query, you want to find candidate docs quickly, the search part. But first, you need to understand if the query typed is the query that was intended. Spelling is the biggest problem here. Followed by synonyms. User types A, but they meant A with a hypothesis, I think, and then it says Gaga means Stefani Germanotta. I think I said that right. And then it's usually search engines turn the query into a structured set of queries with scores for possible interpretations. There is a trade-off here between retrieval, not missing a doc, and accuracy, ranking the right doc at position at 1. Then you need to score this interpretation or query, and then rank the retrieved documents. This is what Microsoft called the algo bit and Google calls search ranking. There are broadly 3 kinds of result kinds. Navigational, such as Facebook, authoritative, should I get a flu shot, and categorical, such as best finance books. The more powerful signals here are I don't know if it means click through or click through, because it says though. but click-through makes more sense to me. The most powerful signals here are click, though, on previously presented dots. If you show the right answer at position 3 and people click on it more than one, then you know that you should be ranking it higher, and you can learn from this. It's machine learning a ranking signal by raw counting clicks. But in the long tail, you don't have enough clicks, so you have to find ways of smearing click signal to more obscure queries or documents. But lots of static signals like page rank and titles and anchors, the words on the links that point to a document, are important too. There is a huge question here about how much machine learning to use. Bing uses a lot. Google doesn't like to. The way that you figure out whether a search algorithm change was good is that you use human raters to rate thousands of random queries with and without the change, and you consider the overall impact of the change. The raters are not rating the algorithm, just the effect it had on top 5 results for a statistical sample of queries. We can assume that Bing spends a redacted amount yearly on rating alone. Google's rater guidelines are published here. An example, Google Weekly Launch Committee meeting is on YouTube. It's old but illustrative of how these changes are deliberated on. Aside, most of the people in this video are still doing this same thing a decade later. By the way, Steve Baker from Luna speaks up with a key insight in this video at 2 minutes 50 seconds, and it's got a video link as well. And it says survey. You can do all this ranking work at a high number of queries per second, presumably about 100,000 of queries per second. I don't know what the fuck's wrong with me. It says, so you need elaborate serving systems, and cost is a factor. Almost a decade ago, Google decided to launch universal search, where any given query was run past multiple search engines. So you could mix in web search, video search, book search, and more, all in one search page. There's like I think an airplane. It's kind of loud by me right now. So, I'm sorry, I was saying, so you could mix in web search, video search, book search, and more, all in one search page. This was presumably 5 times more expensive per query. Then they rolled out something called instant search, which was the idea that for every character you typed in the search box, they would run the search and render the result. This was again 5 to 10 times more expensive per query. It was a huge deal, like they were not sure that they could buy that many servers. It's since been unlaunched in favor of more cycles per query. See below. Search features. Most of the above is about search quality. The quality of the 10 blue links and the continuous effort to get the best link in the top 3 results. As search became more mobile, there was a pivot to giving you the answer first, not 10 blue links. Where did Obama go to school, for example? The array of things in this investment is generally called search features, or domains, or verticals. Bing tried very hard in the beginning to make this their differentiation. Even today, they have better results for college tuition than Google, for example. Features are even more incrementally expensive. You need user interface per domain, data feeds per domain, and then you need to multiply by the number of languages and locales. So cricket is a no-brainer in India and UK. Australian rules football is a critical vertical down under. It's all by the yard, that is, linear in research and development expense. There is a long tail of domains and verticals. My favorite at Google was Pokemon characters and chickens breeds, both experiments in how low you could get the curation task per domain. And then it says, I think it says 118N, or is that I18N? I honestly can't tell what the fuck this says, but it said something like that. And then it says scale and coverage. And it says, and of course, you get to do it all of this in as many languages and platforms as you want. CJK is harder than Latin languages. For example, in Korean, there is no easy way to segment queries into words. I think they mean Chinese, Japanese, Korean? I don't know. Doing all this for low memory features phones or old iPhones might mean variants of all these trade-offs and features, all of which has to be quality assessed and rated on a daily basis. Hopefully, this explains why a world-class search engine is at least a redacted billion a year research and development investment, and that is before you build a search ads business to pay for it. So yeah. Basically, they're going into a lot more of the technicality parts of what it takes to rank and why it's so expensive, and the amount of research and development needed into every aspect of building out this algorithm. And so I obviously think that that could be something that is used, in terms of this argument to explain part of how Google's ability to have done all of this already for such a long period of time, while having those prior agreements in place that kind of prevented other people from really being able to do it in the same way, as we have covered in the previous documents, with the with the exclusivity agreements and the revenue share agreement and the non-compete clauses and things like that. So all of that, plus when you look at this information where they go into detail, like just how much resources you need to effectively compete at that level, and I think all of that goes to speaking to the monopolization aspect, where they were able to monopolize the market, because you have to also be able to prove the limitations in a market for you to monopolize it, in my opinion. So, for example, a lot of us think that Walmart, you could kind of sometimes, with the way that Walmart has gone into certain regions, and basically because Walmart came into effect, a lot of the smaller grocers then had to close. That was like a trend for a while. And in some ways, Walmart, they used to have like a strategy where they would go to food deserts where there was nothing else there. And so it was very welcomed when they came, because people really needed access to that, right? But then they became known for being the person where, like, they would be pushing out local grocers, And so I had a point and I'm trying to remember it. Don't you love when I do this? I do. Let's see. Right, so the proving the market, but you could never really prove that Walmart monopolized in that case, because nothing was really stopping other people from competing with Walmart. You know what I mean? People could still go anywhere. Like, people chose to go to Walmart over those grocers when Walmart came and got built because of the Walmart brand. But Walmart didn't actually do anything to limit the grocer's ability, in some cases, to perform. In some cases, Walmart would be pushing people out, and there are cases where they were limiting people's ability to function. But in some cases, Walmart did nothing but just be Walmart, and because people would rather go shop there, other businesses got closed down. And in those cases, that you can't really prove a monopoly in that case, right? But that's not what happened with Google. With Google, all of what we just saw with this evidence is setting up to field to show there were restrictions in this market that created it, that Google created, so that they were the only ones who could dominate. You know what I'm saying? In my opinion, that's what all this evidence kind of gets us to, is where it's going, in my opinion. And so to recap that, first of all, we looked at some internal emails between Apple employees, including John Giannandrea, who was that dude that used to work at Google and now works at now he works at Apple, or I don't know where he works now, but at the time of where we're at in this documentation, right? But so in the first one, they're talking about scaling in this email, and about how a lot of advertisers churn out quickly from running ads. So you need to be able to scale this data without the advertiser network in place already, because it takes a certain amount of effort to scale from that, right? So yeah, that was kind of my, like, what the first email was kind of talking about. And I think that could be used because they were talking about how important the scale of the market is in order to profit, right? And then next, there was another internal email between John and all of that. You know, I was just, and it's all mostly about Microsoft. It's between John and Adrian and Steve Smith of Apple. And they were talking about the differences in how the Bing versus Google's search results were working. And so, yeah, and they were basically asking, like, could Microsoft Bing catch up with Google? And Apple catch up with Google? And in this, they were talking about how they didn't think they could, because at this point, Google was performing much better, in my opinion, is what I was kind of getting from it. And then we looked, and so those were internal emails from Apple. And then we looked at an internal email from Google. And in that email, they were this is also around the time that they had that complaint filed against them for being a monopoly. And so after that point in writing, they're now talking about how people don't really need data. It's anecdotic. They don't need data. You know what I'm saying? They just need to do better, have higher quality, in my opinion. I'm just highly summarizing. That could be dead ass wrong, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of what I'm getting from it. Like, it's not that they need more data, they just need to do a better job at it. You know, is basically what they were trying to put into writing. Like, yeah. And then we looked at an update presentation. This was an internal Apple presentation, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check that. Yeah, that was an internal Apple presentation on their recent updates. And in it, they were basically kind of talking about how Google was outperforming Bing and Apple, in my opinion, in that presentation. And I think that kind of still lays some groundwork for competitors acknowledging that Google was dominating in the market, which kind of sets the groundwork for the possibility of monopolizing, right? And then last but not least, we just looked at an article that really explained, and this was an internal email between Apple employees, and it was from Giannandrea, not mind you, but it kind of goes into details the way that search results are ranked online, and it goes into a lot of those technicalities and specificities of that, and it also just kind of explains the amount of research and development and resources and data required to be able to scale. So in my opinion, this information sets the groundwork to explain why it would be so difficult for competitors to compete with Google without having access to the same data to scale, in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's what we got from the first half here. Those were the first 5 trial exhibits. So what I'm gonna do now is we're gonna do a little break. I don't really know how long it's gonna be. It's just gonna be whatever feels right for me. So I'm gonna do a break, and then I'm gonna come back, and I'm gonna try and see if I can sit through 5 more trial exhibits. So yeah, alrighty. Thank you for your time. I will be right back. Alrighty, so let's keep going. Next up, we've got trial exhibit UPX270, and this is an email from, I am going to definitely say this wrong, Sachin Malhotra of Microsoft to Raj Kapoor of Microsoft et al. Forwarded, please review, from September 13, 2019, with attached Microsoft presentation. Successful search businesses require skill with users and advertisers. And this is from September 2019, and this is filed November 3rd, 2023. Okie dokie. So, the email, it just seems to be forwarding them the email, other people the email that was originally sent to Raj. And it says, "Hi Raj, can you please look at these slides? Want to make sure that you're good with the slides that reference audience targeting. Sorry, this is a rush. Thanks, Sachin." Oh wow, this is super blurry. So let's see if we can zoom in here. It's gonna be hard to read. Oof. Alright, I'm gonna say what the fuck I think it says, but to be honest, this shit is super pixelated and kind of like blurry, so I don't even know what the fuck it's supposed to be saying, but we're gonna try. So, I believe the slide is captioned titled "Successful Search Businesses Require Scale with Users and Advertisers." And it's kind of a circle flow chart thing on the one side, and so it says like, more users lead to more advertisers, leads to more data, which leads to better search and more relevant ads, which leads to more revenue to invest in development and distribution, which is a cycle back to more users, right? So it's the cycle. And then what I can't really read, it shows user scale, and it says index. It says search engines process content from web pages and create a database that, if then uses to provide consumers with useful results. It says relevance. Search engines incorporate queries from users and provide relevant responses requiring data from several sources. Localized search. Location data collected from user devices enables search engines to return results that are relevant to a user's current location. Entry points. Search engines gain users through entry points such as browser default. And then it says advertiser scale. Advertiser tools. Software products facilitate campaign creation and management for advertisers. Conversions or return on investment data. Advertisers require measurements of campaign effectiveness to sustainably invest in advertising. Targeting for advertisers. Accurate consumer targeting increases the efficiency with which search engines display advertisements as relevant to relevant consumers. I cannot speak. I think I read that right. I don't know. That could be wrong, but close enough. Fuck it. Oh, now it wants to show the same fucking slide much clearer. Okay, thanks, fucking dip fucks. Whatever. Anyway, so now we see the same thing shown again, much clearer, except for what is highlighted is the targeting for advertisers portion, which says accurate consumer targeting increases the efficiency which search engines display advertisements to relevant consumers. And then it says there are several critical inputs required to achieve sufficient user scale. When it talks about user scale, it shows the requirement for scale, the critical input, and a discussion. So for index, the requirement is search engines process content from web pages and create a database that it then uses to provide consumers with useful results. For the critical input, it says engineering investment. For the discussion, it says all major tech companies such as Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, Alibaba, Tencent, etc. have the resources and talent necessary to construct an index. The requirement for relevance to scale is that search engines interpret queries from users and provide relevant responses, requiring data from several sources. Critical input is query and click data at scale. The discussion. Google search accounts for 93% of searches in Europe. Location awareness. The requirement for scale is that location data collected from user devices enables search engines to return results that are tailored to a user's current location. The critical input is mobile data at scale, and a discussion is Google Android accounts for 74% of mobile operating system usage, and Google Search is the default search on iOS, which controls the rest. Entry points. Search engines gain users through entry points, such as a browser default, and that's the requirement for scale. And the critical input here is browser defaults or operating system defaults, and the discussion is Google Search is the default on Chrome on Android and Windows, Apple, Safari, and Mozilla Firefox, which account for 85% of browser usage in Europe. And this reminds me too, like I had a client doesn't want to advertise with Google anymore. He wants to advertise on Apple only. So I'm telling him the way we do this, we can target by device, but we still have to run the ad through Google. And he's like really not understanding why. And I'm trying to explain to him that Google is the search engine for Apple operating system devices, the default search engine. And unless you're running an app ad in the Apple App Store, the only way to run an app to Apple devices is to still run it on Google or to do it through another means, right? And he's like not understanding why Apple doesn't have their own ad store. And I'm like, oh, this kind of explains it. I'm like, look, the evidence is here, because I don't know how to, like, I word it like that, but when sometimes it doesn't even matter if like you're not saying anything rude, if you're just explaining the facts. But if you're just telling a client that the answer is going to be no, that you cannot do something, they perceive you as arguing with them or being defiant and not wanting to do something, even if you're just trying to explain to them that the thing they're asking you to do isn't something that is going to be realistically possible. Like, we can do another version of that to get that same result, but it won't be in that way. They'll still see you as argumentative for just saying, hey, that's not how that works. Like, I don't know, like, communicating with people is difficult, right? Because then you have to do all that ass kissing to make them see, like, oh, no, you're not arguing with them. You're just, like, letting them know that's not fucking how it works. God damn it. Anyway. Sorry. Moving on. So, and then the next, it's a new slide for me, but it's labeled slide 2 here. It says BK5, don't know what the fuck that means. Oh, you know, maybe it's these people's initials though, because Brian King is at the bottom, and then, so it says, are we really saying location awareness instead of localized search? I see this as 4 things. 1, a representation of the webs you can retrieve quickly. 2, enough signal to determine what is valuable for a given term. 3, user queries with location awareness. 4, opportunity to serve the user. Impacts number 2. I think this is a comment from Brian King. It looks here, I think we have another comment from David Snyder. It says, okay, edited the term. I think your points are otherwise covered in this slide. Let us know if you think we should make additional changes. And then we have another redacted slide here. It says page not used in court. And then we have another slide here. So it says Google launched its Ad Data Hub in 2018, which restricted the exportation of log data used to track the success of campaigns. Advertisers could previously export this data. So whenever they did all of that, they were claiming it was because of the new privacy laws with like the General Data Protection Regulation situation and the California Consumer Privacy Law Act that had come into effect around then. But now I'm wondering, was it because of that? Is that the argument they're going to use in court? Like, oh, it's to be compliant with the privacy laws. But was the reality because they were realizing this is more data for their competitors to have? Could it have been that? I'm just asking a question now. But we're going to stick to the first thing because, you know, but Anyway, so it has like this flow chart, and it says Microsoft is doing something similar with AT&T, and it shows advertising impression of log level data as a flow chart, and this flows to third-party services such as data lakes, data management platforms, ad servers, and other tools. And this flow chart, it shows this same flow chart, but then it shows an arrow as if it leads to something else. And that flow chart is then repeated, but then it's labeled with Google Ads Data Hub. And Google Analytics is labeled over data lakes. Google Audience is labeled over data management platforms and ad servers. And Data Studio is labeled over other tools. And on the side, it says this shift made advertisers' ability to track the success of their campaigns much more difficult unless they use Google's products. Google's data from search and display is critical, effectively forcing advertisers to use and pay for its Data Hub cloud offering. And then what's crossed out, it says leverages its dominance to insert itself as an intermediary. Ooh! Does that scream monopoly to anybody else? Anyway, and then it says, it has like a, I don't know if they intend to use these as like brackets, but it says it has like the open and closed brackets, but it says to flesh out specifics of what was previously able to be shared and what permissions were eliminated. And then it looks like a comment on this is from David Snyder, and it says, I think we need to work on this graphic. It doesn't get across the idea that Google log data and third-party data can still be consolidated, but only in Google's cloud. And in the past, other parties could do analysis on it. Maybe we draw this with an analysis company in the middle or something like that, and show that data used to come into it from third parties in Google, and now Google cut off the data and the third parties have to send their data to the Google cloud. And then it's got another redacted page not used in court. So yeah, so basically what this is showing is where they perceive Google as inserting themselves as a default intermediary by excluding and removing the other means of accessing the data from the search results that was previously given to advertisers. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I feel like that could be something that, you know, I think Google's defense is would be but the data protection privacy laws. But I think that the state is going to use this to argue that they were intentionally trying to monopolize, in my opinion. Like, you know what I mean? I could see both of those arguments going up in there with this evidence, right? So next up, we've got exhibit UPX 0273. And this is an email from Eddy Q of Apple to Tim Cook of Apple. And it is replying to Google versus Bing RPM. And I'm used to seeing that. I forgot what the fuck the R stands for, to be honest, but I'm used to seeing that as it relates to video impression views. And this is from April 27th, 2016. And it is uploaded into court November, I know I'm not using the right words. Whatever, I'm not a fucking lawyer, damn it. Filed into November 8th, 2023, whatever the fuck. Well, nowadays, you upload shit to file it if you want to, right? Anyway, great, another fucking thing that's redacted, mostly. Let's see, is any of this not redacted? The one line on here that's not redacted, it says, here is an updated search revenue share analysis based on our latest discussions. I think the team has done a great job on it. So what we can do is see that they are sharing search revenue share analysis. And this is an internal Apple document right here. It's related. They're looking at Google versus Bing. I'm wondering if they're considering revenue per thousands impressions with the RPM. And then they're seeing here's an updated search revenue share analysis. So we know that they back in 2016 were trying to account for how much money is being made from the revenue share, and there seems to be obvious tracking of the market share at this point. And so I'm assuming those specific numbers were used in court, which are redacted for public filing. So, yeah. Next up, we've got exhibit UPX0287, and this is a Google presentation on T-Mobile and a Google discussion doc from January 17th, 2017. And this was originally filed November 15th, 2023. Ooh, this is a bit long. We'll see how long it takes me to get through this. This might be, if I finish off here, then we've done 8 exhibits in this stream. So that might be a good place to leave off. We'll see how long this takes. So it's a T-Mobile Google discussion doc. And then right here it says, reminder of confidentiality. Everything shared in this meeting is shared under non-disclosure agreement and not to be communicated without Google's consent. And then it's got a side with a guy speaking in front of a background that says, conversational, get things done in your world. And the notes under it say, Sundar introduced the Google Assistant at Google I/O earlier in the year. The Google Assistant represents a powerful interface that is easy to use and can help in the daily lives of your customers. Next slide says Google Assistant 2016. It shows Allo, then the Pixel, then Home, and then Actions on Google. And it says, we've been busy since May in bringing Google Assistant across a number of surfaces. Then it shows Allo. Am I saying that right? Is it Allo or Allo? 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 I don't know. But it says in September, we launched the Google Assistant on Allo. This launch helped us develop and evolve the notion of engaging the user in a conversation. The user interface and interaction design here has profoundly influenced our user interface and personality of the Google Assistant. We learned so much from this product and continue to learn from it. And then for the Pixel, it says in October, we launched the Google Assistant on Pixel. So I'm assuming these are just different devices here, right? It says our design goal was to explore what's possible when you deeply integrate the Google Assistant, the phone. The user engagement has been terrific. We are seeing users interact with Google Assistant in ways that are simply not possible with basic voice search. We're convinced that bringing this experience to more Android phones will benefit both our users and partners like you. So yeah. And then it says, it's got like a bunch of logos, you know, like CNN, CNBC, it's got Food Network, The Huffington Post, ABC News Radio, Netflix, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, all of these different media outlets, you could say, between news, radio, and television. And it says, just last week, we announced the start of our program to allow third parties to integrate with the Google Assistant. This will initially be for Google Home device, but we plan on extending the ecosystem to all surfaces in which the Google Assistant is available over time. Smarter and Better, a platform toolkit for building a world of connected devices. I don't even know what the fuck these logos are. It's got Google Cast and Android, 2 of them. It says one more thing. Android Things, or Weave, very high-level overview should be between slides 5 and 6. That is, we're evolving our platform toolkit for this new world. Then Assistant will tie it together at user experience level. And it says smarter and better with a service layer enabled by Google Play and the Google Assistant. So it's basically the same slide, but what's added is the Google Play, Google Assistant connecting to Gmail, Maps, Search, YouTube, Android, paying shit, whatever, I don't know, Netflix, all that shit, I don't know. And it says one more thing. Android thing, oh, okay, no, this is the same fucking description, I think, yeah. And then it has the same description again. And then it says, smarter and better, ensuring a consistent experience for the Google Assistant across Android. And so it shows home button pedals, authentication gestures with a fingerprint, and the home button pedals is like, you know, when you have the bottom of your phone screen and you can go to like the home and shit, or go back. And then it's got OK Google Hotword. It says the assistant will be coming to L, M, and N devices in Q1 as part of a Google app update. It says speaker notes. We're bringing the assistant to the rest of the Android ecosystem. Google Assistant is a massive commitment for Google and will be putting enormous amounts of resources to make it successful. To the extent that there are great experiences in the operating equipment manufacturer ecosystem, we are excited to bring them to the forefront in our external communications. In addition, we really want to allow partners to use the Google Assistant to differentiate. We're excited to explore how partners can use the Google Assistant as a differentiator in your marketing as well, provided a very high quality bar. Lastly, it's important for us to build a strong, consistent assistant brand, just like it's important for you to build a strong brand. So we want to work closely to get all the brand requirements right, working cooperatively. Need to clarify that we expect this fully optimized assistant experience to roll into devices throughout the year. OK Google Hotword, home button pedals animation similar to on Pixel. Screen off physical action, that is long press on fingerprint. And then the next slide is labeled revenue share discussion. And it says revenue share today. And for search, it says exclusivity and default on all service access points. And it says 1, Google Chrome browser. 2, browser frame on 3P browsers, aka address bar. 3, default home start new tab page on all 3P browsers. 4, all search intents, requests, and defaults. And it says net advertising revenue share, but that is redacted. And then for revenue share, it says in 2016, T-Mobile earned redacted more than in 2015. And it's redacted here. And it's got redacted more revenue per device in 2016 versus 2015 due to Google investments in product. And it says revenue share. Why are we making changes? As our ecosystem evolves rapidly, we would like to take this opportunity to ensure key ecosystem priorities, that is, assistant or security, are reflected. For revenue share, new terms. Search, you have exclusivity and default on all service access points. Chrome is in the hot seat and default. And then the -1 screen is reserved to Google. Assistant, and this is with T-Mobile, by the way. And for assistant, 1P assistants are okay, no 3P assistants on DHS and -1 screen, with active hot words out of the box, with hot word buttons or gestures enabled out of the box. No, co-branded equals 3P. Security, new devices must be updated quarterly, 90 days within patch release, or 2 years after launch. The requirements is phased in over time. Note, only new devices with partner revenue share client ID. The user experience, Gmail, calendar, photos, keyboard set as default. Android Messenger in the hot seat and set as the default. Duo on DHS. Note, Android Messenger will be on an assistant access PT. Net revenue will be shared. Net advertising revenue share was redacted. So this is showing an update in the revenue share agreements at that time with these terms, where it's basically saying like Google is giving T-Mobile more money, and in return T-Mobile is ensuring that Google has these defaults and exclusivity agreements so that they're the main choice. You know what I'm saying? And in prior trial exhibits, we also established how when something is a default, it's not likely to get changed unless it doesn't work for somebody. You know what I'm saying? Or they have a reason to prefer something else. Alright, and so then this next slide is titled Revenue Share, Security Requirements. And it's mostly redacted, but it says to determine compliance, we will only use new devices with new client ID as a denominator. T-Mobile already updates redacted of devices. And then it's, let's see here. The next up we've got, it says search. And it says search access points. More access points means more search revenue. So the existing access points were Google search widget, Google Chrome browser, browser frame on 3P browsers, also known as omnibox or address bar, the default home, start, new tab page on all 3P browsers, all search intents, requests, and defaults. And then we have new additional access points, which means more search revenue, the -1 screen, so the Google Assistant or other service determined by Google is okay, and preloaded launchers. So yeah. So, and then it shows visual representation here of this search implementation. We've got Chrome in the hot seat, default on all access points, and the -1 screen reserved for Google. And it says also Chrome behavior is changing, but then it has a link to a Google Drive file here, so I don't know what the fuck that is. And then it says assistant. And it says assistant is a classification, and it shows 3P assistants as Alexa, Siri, Facebook has one, as well as Cortana. And it says 1P assistants, carrier-owned assistant. Operating equipment manufacturers' assistants are 3P. And it says co-branded assistant is treated as 3P. Co-branded means it deeply integrates or takes core functionality of 3P assistant labeled with carrier-owned brand. Next up, it shows assistant implementation. So we've got the it is for each placement on the device, whether or not they can do a 3P assistant, a white labeled assistant, or a 1P assistant. So for DHS, no 3P, no white labeled, okay for 1P. For -1 screen, no 3P, no white label, no 1P. For hardware button enabled out of the box, no 3P, no white labeled, okay for 1P. For hardware voice activated out of box, no 3P, no white label, okay 1P. For preloaded outside of the box -1 and DHS, it's okay to do 3P, white label, or 1P. Under that revenue share agreement is what I'm assuming. And then it says security. Security, why changing? So the users are not getting security updates. The increasing attack sophistication and constant public attention. So for users not getting security updates, it shows the percentage of users that aren't getting them, and apparently a bunch are not, and according to this graph here. And then it says, and it looks like 80% are not getting the updates. And then it says increasing attack sophistication. It says where the 1 million breached accounts are accounted for now. It shows 57% in Asia, 19% in the Americas, 15% in Africa, and 9% in Europe. And it says 1 million. And then for public attention, we have a quote from Forbes in December 2016, and it says, Android Gooligan hackers just scored the biggest ever theft of Google accounts, as a headline. So security. We work to make updates easy. Make Android updates easier for partners to distribute. Project Treble modularizes SW stack to reduce dependencies. I don't know what the fuck SW means here. Google OTA, and it says GOTA, ensures operating equipment manufacturers have OTA infrastructure available. I honestly don't know what the fuck that is. And this says tracking and data sharing with all partners, OEMs, carriers, and SOCs. OEM is operating equipment manufacturer. I don't know what the fucking SOC is. And then it says quality improvements with monthly security bulletins. Continuing security, we work to make updates easy. It says help manage SKUs and complexity. Play auto installs enable operating equipment manufacturers to reduce the number of SKUs. So a SKU is a code that a business uses to identify an item that is offered to somebody, right? So every shirt you buy has a SKU. But the way you set up those SKUs can be different, right? Like, so I've worked at companies where any shirt that was in this cut would have the same fucking SKU. It could be this shirt with flowers, a blue shirt, a red shirt. It's gonna have the same SKU as long as it's this cut from this brand, right? But then I've worked at other businesses where, no, every single variation of this shirt will have its own SKU. So I've seen businesses set it all up differently. I've seen it typically recommended where if you do plan on being able to target someone for each specific item, you need an individual SKU for that. But I don't know. You can do it however works for you. There's a lot of strategies for it, you know? And it can also be like, depending on the amount of products you have, right? Like if you're a small boutique store and there's only so many of these shirts you can do, then yeah, it makes sense to market each individual itemized one because you don't have that much inventory. But if you're a store with a huge inventory, then maybe it does make sense for you to only do one SKU for every type of this shirt, because then you're reducing the data overload and you don't have to worry about updating when you're out of stock because there's going to be one of these available potentially. Things like that, right? Like, so you can make these decisions based on what works for you. Anyway, and then it says improve user uptake. Seamless updates via A/B partitions and streaming updates. Incentivize healthy ecosystem behavior. MADA requirement for quarterly security update. And if I remember correctly, this was like the mobile application distribution agreement or some shit like that was the MADA deal. So yeah. This next slide seems to be redacted. Seems we got more redacted shit here. And then it says user experience. Why changing? Assistant gets better if other Google apps are used more. And then it shows an example where it says set a reminder for noon. And it says once Assistant connects to more Google services, then it'll really be your own personal Google. And that's a quote from Mashable. And then it says Android Messenger, hot seat and default. iMessage is #1 reason users switch to iOS. RCS improves native Android messaging and may help attract users. It says RCS turn SMS into a rich and engaging platform. For consumers who gain access to the new messaging experience, they'll be able to take advantage of features that rival Apple's iMessage or other third-party messaging apps. And this is a quote from TechCrunch. Another quote from PC World says, It's worth noting how many cool features Messenger has. Google's humble texting app supports, I don't know if you say it GIF or GIF, to be honest. So, GIFs, stickers, photos, videos, and of course, all the emoji your phone supports. And then from Android guys, the quote is, Android Messenger is the best all-around texting app for Android devices. And last up, we got one more slide here that says product evolution and messaging as a platform. And it's got plugins, enhanced A2P, and multi-devices. Don't know what the fuck A2P means. Alright, so towards the end here, I got real bored with all this technical bullshit because, man, fuck that shit. Who the fuck cares? Unless you're into it, and that's real cool. I'm glad you are so I can use this shit. But basically, what I'm getting from this entire fucking presentation, and mind you, this is a presentation from, it's a Google presentation, but on their relationship with T-Mobile, right? And in here, what's really standing out to me is the revenue share agreement updates, and where they're really trying to make sure they're locking in that default status in exchange for the money given, right? And so I think that's something to really highlight and pay attention to. So yeah. So let's see. I'm gonna take a look here real quick and see if we're gonna cover more or wrap it up. Let's see. You know what? I think I will cover more. I'm going to cover 2 more trial exhibits, and then we're gonna wrap this bitch up, and I'm gonna take a break, and we'll maybe do more today. Maybe do more this weekend or something. I don't know. We'll see. We'll get there when we get there. But next up, we're going to take a look at trial exhibit number UPX0292. And this is an email from Jeff Giard, I don't know if I'm saying that right, of T-Mobile, to Michael Goo of T-Mobile. And it's forwarded the search negotiation status. And this is from September 3rd, 2020. Oh, this is the time to really negotiate, right? Because it's like, hey, they're getting sued for being a monopoly. Let's renegotiate these terms. That's entertaining to me in my head. Let's see how it goes. I haven't read it yet. And it's from the Giard Deposition, Exhibit 7. And this was filed November 15th, 2023. Okay, so it's from Jeff to Michael. It's forwarded the search negotiation status. The attachment is a 2020 search summary of terms. That I don't think we're going to get access to that attachment, but that's fine. But the original email that was forwarded is from Jeff at T-Mobile, and it's to a bunch of other T-Mobile people in 2020. And it says, and it's the search negotiation status that says, hi Matt, since we didn't get a chance to meet on this, here is a quick status on the search negotiations. Google usually has a couple of main objectives they try to accomplish in these search deals. Last time their focus was on Google Assistant and security updates, as we just saw. This time, around the Department of Justice investigation and market trends have changed the dynamic. That's what the fuck I just said. I'm sorry. Okay. Their objectives in this agreement are focused on improving Android market share trends and trying to prevent the Department of Justice penalties related to anti-competitive business practices. Who saw that coming? So now we have in writing, other people perceive them as doing anti-competitive shit and that they think Google might be trying to act like they're not. That's what this looks like. That's why I think it's put in the evidence. That is fucking hilarious. Sitting through all that boring bullshit was totally worth it for this. Anyway, then it says, this has resulted in our ability to get Google to include the following structural changes to the term so far, which are redacted, but I think that's hilarious. They were like, oh, leverage, bitch, we got this lawsuit coming up. Let's see how we can renegotiate. This is so fucking entertaining to me. And then it says, a few of our key proposals that we are still negotiating are, 1, higher revenue share. They're like, yeah, we're gonna need some more money, Mr. Monopoly Man. 2, guaranteed to not withhold Google Mobile GMS, whatever the fuck, certification if we choose to use an alternative search provider for an Android handset. I forgot what the fuck the GMS stands for, but to my understanding, if I remember correctly, that aspect, they were basically Google. Part of how Google locked people into exclusivity was basically being like, if you do anything we don't approve, it's treason. I'm just kidding. It means you're not certified as safe for Google Mobile, and so therefore we're not going to share our revenue with you or let you use our apps. But at this point, all of these operating equipment manufacturers had built their devices and their business in a way in which they're relying on Google's access to the apps, because in order to share into the revenue with Google, Google made it so they had to use their apps to do that, right? So it's all connected. Anyway, and then it says, I have attached a quick summary of key deal points in each of our positions as of today. I wish I could see that. We expect a new red line back from Google this week. It would be helpful if you could reinforce the strategic nature of our relationship with Hiroshi and how that would be reflected in our search deal. It's redacted and says, please let me know if you have questions. So yeah, this is fucking hilarious to me. Basically, it's just what I thought it was going to be. They were like, all right, this lawsuit is coming up. This is the time to get more money, bitches. Let's do it. It's the time to get more money and loosen up that exclusivity. Come on. That's what I love this for them. You know, I hope that went well. So, and then next up we have trial exhibit UPX0293. And this is an email from Michael Murphy of Google to Ruth Porat. I don't think I'm saying that right, of Google et al. And it seems like it's a blind copy of the deal review agenda for Thursday, March 19th at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and this is from March 17th, 2020. And this was filed November 8th, 2023. Oh, so it's from Michael Murphy of Google, and it's to Ruth Porat, Philip Schindler, and Jerry Dishler, and Kent Walker, and Don Harrison of Google. And then CC'd, you've got Prabhakar Raghavan, so sorry if I said that wrong, Joan Brady, Kristen Ranke, plug, I don't know how the fuck to say your name, man. A deal review email, I guess that's a legal email, a redacted email address, Jamie Rosenberg, Mikey Herring. Well, all the email addresses are redacted, but that name on the email address was redacted. Adrian McAllister, Christian Kramer, Anna Karnasheva, and Yuki Richardson, as well as Helen Sal, Matt Schwartz, and John Gold. Okay. Oh, okay, so maybe it's not blind copy, maybe it's just a BC. I don't know what the fuck the BC is. So it's BC deal review agenda for Thursday, March 19th at 11 a.m. And it's privileged and confidential, it says, and it says Philip, Kent, Jerry, Don, Ruth. We have one topic scheduled. Wait a minute. Or it says Kent. Kent was not named. Oh, Kent was named right here. Okay. We have one topic scheduled for BC Review Thursday. Our proposed update to the revenue share agreement structure for carriers. We expect most attendees to join remotely, but we have reserved a room as a contingency in case anyone will join live. The GBC handle is updated on all calendar invitations. Best regards, Mike. And so, number one, U.S. Carrier Revenue Share Agreement Structure. Materials. The reason for BC Review. Non-standard incentives. XPA Program Review. I don't know what the fuck that means. Ask for BC. I don't know what the fuck BC means here. Approve updated U.S. Carrier Revenue Share Agreement Structure that includes fewer configuration requirements, shift from full search integration to default home screen, or DHS. So DHS means default home screen. And then, right, so basically I'm finding that very entertaining, where they're like putting, it looks like, in my opinion, they're possibly putting together a meeting plan for loosening up these terms in advance, you know, basically being like, well, we know it's coming, might as well plan for it, in my opinion, potentially is what this is. Maybe I'm wrong. And And then it says reduced U.S. carrier revenue share. They're trying to reduce it. What? Redacted status quo on new devices. No change to installed base. Allows exception for Verizon only to allow Yahoo Home mobile app with Bing powered Yahoo search bar preloaded on the +1 screen, not the default home screen. Delegation of authority to platforms and ecosystems cross-functional deal review. That's what they're calling the PEX. To determine how to utilize savings from reduced revenue share. Current plans include volume incentives for premium devices and longer-term initiatives to drive Android share. Deal representatives, we've got Jamie Rosenberg, VP of Android and Comms, Adrian McAllister, Senior Director, Global Partnerships, Anna Kartasheva, Senior Manager, Platforms and Ecosystem Strategy, Yuki Richardson, Director, Finance, Platforms and Ecosystems, Helen Sau, Senior Corporate Counsel. And rationale in support of the deal. We've got incentive realignment appropriate given current trends, whereby U.S. carrier revenue share spends its growing year over year while Android is losing share. And this is all redacted. Actives and redacted numbers here, $400 plus shipment year. What a Y means year over year, right? Why do I think that? Yeah. Now it says savings from the new revenue share agreement structure can self-fund bounties in years 1 to 2 to drive targeted devices and be redeployed in years 3 plus to grow the Android ecosystem. Search usage not expected to be materially impacted as long as Google retains placement on DHS. Estimated revenue loss across U.S. carriers is redacted annually, while saving redacted through 2024. Relaxing configuration requirements to allow preloads of alternative search apps helps ease regulatory risk and reinforces Google's principle to provide options to users. I'm so entertained because so literally in last night's live stream and in previous court filing, we saw how, in my opinion, Google was literally trying to reduce people's access to other options, right? And now we're seeing they are putting in light of the lawsuit filed against them that they're saying in writing, we want to ease regulatory risk and let's reinforce our principle to provide options to users. Because that does not seem to have, you don't seem to be acting on your principle if that is your principle. You know what I'm saying? Like, wow. Anyway, when it says carve out for Verizon allows partners to advance their current post-acquisition strategy for distribution of 1P applications across their user base. So yeah, basically what I thought I was going to get from this would be like them, trying to cover things up, and that does seem to be the case in my opinion. But another thing I didn't expect is, even despite that, they still seem to be trying to see how they can make sure that they're reducing the revenue share agreement so they don't have to pay as much, in my opinion, in exchange for the loosening of those configuration requirements, in my opinion, is what I'm seeing. Unless I interpreted that wrong. But that's what I got from this. Like, right? Like, what the fuck? Wow. Anyway, yeah. So now I'm just going to sum up the second half of the trial exhibits here that we went through. And so the second part of everything, we went over the email from Sachin, I'm so sorry, I don't think I'm saying her name right. Sachin Malhotra of Microsoft to Raj Kapoor of Microsoft. And so all of this was about a Microsoft presentation where they were literally saying that successful search businesses require scale with users and advertisers. So this again backs up that you do need scale to that having the scale is how Google was able to monopolize this market. And where Google was trying not to give up that data, that is part of what prevented other people to compete effectively. In my opinion, is what this presentation helped show. And then we looked at another exhibit, an email from Eddy to Tim Cook, and these are Apple employees. And in this email, they were looking at Google versus Bing search revenue. And if I understood that correctly. And the thing is, though, all of that was redacted, so we couldn't see it. But the one line we could see, it says this is an updated search revenue share analysis. So we know that Apple was concerned and looking into that analysis. And that must have been something about it must have been important because it was admitted into evidence. It's redacted for public filing, but I'm assuming that it was not redacted for them to see in court, you know? So there's a reason it was shown that I'm not understanding because it's all redacted, but I'm assuming it's gotta obviously have to do with there's showing that they're looking into the revenue share agreements, the revenue share in search, not the share agreements. They're looking into the revenue share in search. We're going to get to the share agreements. And they're claiming in the presentation where it's labeled successful search businesses require to scale. So yeah. Yeah. And then after that, we see another email, a Google presentation. Or actually, I apologize. That email wasn't having to do with requiring scale. That was the one before. This was about Google versus Bing search revenue. I apologize. But that's in context of having looked into the fact that they did say that successful search requires scale in the email before, right? Anyway, and so then we have the Google presentation on T-Mobile. We've got a few of those here. But with the T-Mobile Google discussion, that goes into basically, in my opinion, they were kind of renegotiating, or this was kind of like a primer in regards to what was the setup for renegotiating the revenue share agreement. So this is from 2017, the presentation we had looked at, and that was before Google had been accused of a monopoly. And at this point in that presentation, we can see where Google was negotiating to maintain exclusivity and for T-Mobile's revenue sharing to be based on that Google exclusivity and that Google default status, right? That's what I understood from that presentation. And then we see a email between the T-Mobile employees related to the search negotiation status, and this would be years later, where they're like, okay, this monopoly Department of Justice case is coming up against Google. How can we use that to put pressure on them and renegotiate our deal at this point? And then we finished up with an internal email of Google, basically, where, in my opinion, they were like, we need to reevaluate our deals to reflect current possible issues with regulatory issues regarding competition. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that was, it's a lot to track, but yeah, so that was the last 5 documents that we read. And so we've gone through 10 total in this live stream. You know what I'm saying? So let me see if I can recap the whole live stream now. Let's see if I can do that well. So we started off, let's see here, we're gonna have to, yeah, so we started off with an email from internally between Apple employees, and I didn't understand fully the context of it because a lot of it was redacted, But they were basically talking about how scale was important and investing in search was important in this email. And so, yeah, I feel like that kind of relates to setting up this stage of monopolizing the market to show, that Google had this history of investing and the resources to be able to scale, and that they were able to reduce access to their competition to having those same opportunities. You know what I'm saying? And so then we see another email related to Microsoft between those same Apple employees, which would be John and Adrian. And in that email, they are comparing Google and Bing. And they're basically saying that Google is still currently providing better results in their opinion. Then they went to another email between Hal and Daniel of Google. Hal is the economist dude. I don't know who the fuck Daniel is. But in there, this is in 2020, mind you. So they're basically saying, and so Hal had previously said in email to Eddy that the scalability of data was crucial, right? And now Hal is saying to Daniel, it's not that you need a lot of data, it's that you need to have good data. You know what I'm saying? And so Hal does seem, and Hal had also kind of said that in a quote to Times, but then denied that's what he meant to Eddy, right? So Hal does seem to be kind of flip-flopping in these emails, in my opinion, throughout these trial exhibits, right? But yeah, fucking, if I got that correctly, I don't know. But Dan is saying in here he's not keen on talking to regulators, which I think is funny in these emails, right? Because they're being sued regarding their regulation of competition. But they're basically saying in these emails, after having previously admitted that the way that they built their business was on having data to scale, now they're saying it's not that those people couldn't compete with us because they don't have enough data. It's because their data's not good and they're not working hard enough. You know what I mean? In my opinion, is kind of what I got from that. I was like, what the fuck? So yeah. And then let's see. We had also looked at a presentation on a status update from Apple that I can't fucking pronounce, so whatever. But in there, they do talk about, again, how Google is outperforming Bing, and then they have an email regarding breaking down a lot of the search language and the terms regarding how does the search algorithm work between Apple employees. That's something else we reviewed. And that also explains, in my opinion, why you needed such a long history and how expensive it was and how much work went into getting all of the data and the resources necessary to effectively compete with Google, and why it would be so hard for any company to do that at this point, right? And then we see another email from Sachin Malhotra to Raj, between Microsoft employees about how businesses needed scale with users and advertisers. Then we see the redacted email where Apple employees are comparing Google and Bing revenue related to search. And then after that, we see the Google presentation where it shows the T-Mobile Google discussion document, and that kind of explains how before the monopoly case happened, Google was still at that point trying to make sure that the basis of the revenue share was based on default settings and priority placements for Google, right? And then we looked at some internal emails, the T-Mobile emails, internal employees, where they talk about, okay, now that Google is facing these lawsuits, this is the time for us to renegotiate our deals. Let's get more money right now. Let's loosen up the regulations on us. And so, yeah, and then the last thing that we just went over was the email from the Google employees, where, in my opinion, I feel like they were like, all right, let's brace ourselves. Shit is hitting the fan. And so let's put up an umbrella so that way less shit hits us, in my opinion. You know what I mean? It looked like, in my opinion, that they were discussing how would they, so some key points for how would they go into the negotiations when it came to addressing the loosening of the regulations and the revenue share agreements in light of the competition issue. So that way they could go into the case looking a bit better, right? Like, yeah, we're trying to be amenable. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's kind of what I took from it. So yeah. So next time we'll just keep going. We'll see how much we can get through. We got through 10 more case filings today, which now puts us at 76 trial exhibits covered, over 14 videos on just the trial exhibits. And this is all from the search monopoly case filed. The original complaint was filed in 2020 in Judge Mehta's court. Mehta, and that is, we've been going over the trial exhibits from 2023 lately, right now, and yeah, and that will keep going, just seeing how much we can get through when we can get through it. So thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you. I hope you have a great day. Welcome to this Newsday Tuesday, or I guess bye from this Newsday Tuesday. And alrighty, see you next time. Thanks for watching. Join the loyalty program at noladeafchild.com/loyalty and check in during live streams to get points for rewards.